The first Fazbear Entertainment restaurant in the FNaF timeline has always seemed relatively simple, as the location that started it all with 2 Springlock suits is the location where the bite victim and maybe Charlotte died and shut down, possibly being reused as the FNaF 6 building later on. Seems simple enough, right? Well, after both Security Breach and recently the Ruin DLC, it seems a bit more complicated than we thought it was. So in this video, we're going to be talking about everything that we don't know for sure about Fredbears that actually makes a lot of sense with the information from both Security Breach and Ruin. Arguably the strangest ending in the Ruin DLC is what the files refer to as the Brazil ending, where Cassie takes a wrong turn and finds a Fredbear cutout, then puts her mask on and sees Gregory and Vanessa eating ice cream on the hill, with Helpy there too. The thing about this that's interesting though is the name of the Fredbear cutout in the files being Sinkhole 70s Freddy Ice Cream. What's interesting about this is that it says that this version of Fredbear, designed like Freddy like we see in the Security Breach Fredbear posters, existed in the 1970s. The reason this sparked a whole mini-theory is because of the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Pressure. The story Pressure is all about a guy named Luca wearing a Springtrap suit for a game in the roleplay area of Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. He has to chase his friends and kill them in the game, but he quickly realizes that this Springtrap suit, which is extremely realistic and even smells like death, is a real Springlock suit. The Springlocks slowly begin to press into him and he eventually dies from his injuries while stopping a dude from doing something bad to a child or whatever in the process. It's a great story, but not only is it great as just a story, but it also explains a lot about Springlock suits. When Lucas starts to realize he's inside a real Springlock suit, we get this quarter-page long lore dump. Quote, "The Springlock suits were discontinued not long after they were created because the locking mechanisms were often faulty. They could get triggered by the movement of the costume's occupant, and if they were triggered fully, the metal clamps would shoot out and impale the occupant, fatally." End quote. We also get some more insight on how the Springlock suits work, but what I want to focus on is this quote specifically, and even more specifically that first line. The Springlock suits were discontinued not long after they were created. We know from FNaF 3 that the Springlock suits were discontinued at some point between 1983 and 1985, as they were discontinued before the Missing Children incident, but after Fredbear shut down, which we know from the fact that Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are Springlock suits and still exist at Fredbear's during the Bite of 83. Now, the Springlock failure that shut down the Springlocks could have been the Bite of 83. Sure, Fredbear is in animatronic mode, but there's Springlocks in multiple areas of the suits, which Pressure tells us as well. Different parts of the suit can activate at different times, so it could have been specifically a failure with the Springlocks in the mouth. Another option could be that calling it a Springlock failure could just be referring to an error with the Springlock suits in general, rather than the locks themselves. And it's also possible that it was simply called a Springlock failure so that nobody would question exactly what happened, and so that they could try to cover up the bite. This may not be the case, but it could be. I'm not saying it is, I'm just explaining the possibility. But it's undeniable that the Springlock suits still existed up to and possibly beyond the Bite of 83, which was obviously in 1983. That means that they were discontinued around the mid-80s or so. The reason this is so important is because the Springlock suits didn't last that long. The suits were discontinued not long after being created, meaning they must have been created in the early 80s. But as we just discussed, Fredbear's Family Diner was open in the 1970s, so how can that be the case without the Springlock suits? Well, if we really think about it, nowhere does it state that the Springlock suits were the first ever mascots Fazbear Entertainment had. They were the first animatronics, but they don't have to be the first mascots. I now turn your attention to the Fredbear's Family Diner posters from Security Breach. We have Fredbear, who is designed much more like Freddy, and we have a Spring Bonnie suit that looks nothing like Springtrap. He looks just like Glitchtrap instead. Glitchtrap himself is a costume made of fabric designed like Spring Bonnie, but not like the Spring Bonnie that became Springtrap. The Glitchtrap suit is the Spring Bonnie suit from Fredbear's before the Springlocks existed, and Fredbear originally had the design of regular Freddy before the Springlock suits were created. A Springlock version of the Glitchtrap suit was created and Fredbear's design was changed when it happened. Fredbear's Family Diner only had fabric costumes of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie for the first years it existed, and we know costumes like this did exist because of the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories, the Mimic, and the series epilogues, as well as the ending of Ruin outright showing them. Consider the fact that it's very likely that the FNaF 6 building was originally Fredbear's Family Diner and was repurposed, and the FNaF 6 building strangely has costumes like this when there's no reason it should since it has the regular animatronics. These costumes were from Fredbear's. The Fredbear cutout from the Brazil ending is of Fredbear when he had the design of Freddy, and it's labeled as being from the 70s, meaning that Fredbear in the 70s did have the design of Freddy before eventually being changed, and that Freddy design went over to our favorite bear animatronic Freddy Fazbear himself later on. And hell, this even explains something from all the way back in FNaF 1. In the tale story The Mimic, we learned that all the Fazbear animatronics were made from these costumes, with the fabric and fur suits essentially being wrapped around metal parts and being stuck onto an endoskeleton. The costumes were transformed into the animatronics. That means that the costumes of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy could have all existed when Fredbear's only had these costumes. The Freddy mascots could have all existed in Fredbear's Family Diner since the 70s. So what does this explain from FNaF 1? Well, on night 1 of FNaF 1, Phone Guy says that the animatronics haven't been cleaned in 20 years.
If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
Many people now think this is a retcon, an oversight, or an exaggeration from Phone Guy's part, but no. The costumes that were used to make the animatronics did exist 20 years ago, and even back then, they were never washed. Something that's important to remember is that the Fredbear and Spring Bonnie animatronics existed at both Fredbear's Family Diner and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The ones at Freddy's would have had to have been created after the Springlocks already existed, meaning they could be completely different designs compared to the ones at Fredbear's, and they actually are. See, in the Stage 01 minigame from FNaF 3, we see Fredbear with a brown hat and a black bow tie. There's two ways to interpret this. You could either say that this is Golden Freddy, as Golden Freddy in the Silverized graphic novel has a brown hat, and that when Golden Freddy appears in the FNaF games, his hat is black because he's a projection, while the actual animatronic is a brown hat, which is a bit confusing and unnecessary. But the other option is that because the background of the minigame was black, Scott had to change the color. It's the same reason Purple Guy is purple rather than black. The Stage 01 minigame takes place at Freddy's, considering we're saving the spirit who possesses Foxy, who dies at Freddy's, and that means that Stage 01 Fredbear is the one to become Golden Freddy. The Spring Bonnie from Freddy's, on the other hand, is the one who becomes Springtrap. How do we know that? Because the one from Fredbear's is the one who is designed more like Glitchtrap. Take a look at the supply closet from FNaF 4. On the shelf, we see the head of Spring Bonnie, and it's designed very similarly to Glitchtrap. Glitchtrap was the original Spring Bonnie, and when the Springlock suits were created, Spring Bonnie kept the same basic design, unlike Fredbear, who changed colors and passed his design along to someone else. I also think that the Fredbear's Family Diner Spring Bonnie suit is the same one that Afton used to repair himself after the FNaF 3 fire, as the design of Scraptrap is very similar to Glitchtrap and the Fredbear's Spring Bonnie. The only question left here is where Fredbear and Spring Bonnie went after Fredbear shut down. Were they just left in Fredbear's Family Diner to rot? Maybe, but if FNaF 6 is Fredbear's, I feel like they would have been found and mentioned in the Tales from the Pizzaplex epilogues if that was the case. It's very possible that Afton just stuffed them into Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, away in one of the spare rooms, and after FNaF 3, William Afton returned to retrieve Spring Bonnie and fix himself, but we'll go a bit more in-depth on that in the next theory, which will be all about FNaF VR. Interestingly enough, Steelwool has gone on record saying that they would love to make a Fredbear's Family Diner game, so that could be what they work on after Help Wanted 2 comes out, and maybe there we'll get some of the answers this theory may be bringing to the forefront. So, this theory turned out to be a bit less of a mini theory than I originally intended, but that's fine, it's still relatively mini. But I really hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know your thoughts on the theory in the comments. I put a lot of thought into it, and I think all the conclusions I came to make a lot of sense and explain quite a bit. But if you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys!